Welcome back, maggots, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Fear Father Chronicles. In this episode, we'll be exploring 3 truly horrific tales. If you are easily creeped out, this might be a good time for you to stop the video and go crying to your mommy. Let's get into it. When my troublemaking friends and I were 13, one of our favorite activities was Saturday night ding-dong ditch sessions. 20 years ago, we all lived on the same block in a typical suburban neighborhood, which had fewer houses and more woods than it does now. For the sake of this story, I'll only give my friends first names: Wyatt, Rosie, and McKenna. Either Wyatt or Rosie usually approached the houses to ring the bells, while McKenna and I quickly found hiding spots a few houses down. I remember the reactions of the men who answered the doors. They were almost all the same. They would step outside, yell something, and then go back inside. Sometimes we rang the bell again to elicit a better reaction. One man even threatened to call the cops after we rang his bell a second time. When he shut his door, we sprinted down the street to the next block. As I mentioned, 10 years ago, there were patches of woods where houses now stand. On the next block, the houses appeared more unkempt, and a few patches of woods surrounded them. The first house on that block was directly across from a patch of woods, providing us with an ideal hiding spot. This house looked run down: tall grass, a ratty old car covered in the driveway, and an overall small size. Wyatt dashed across the street to ring the bell, barely making it before the door swung open. A large, stocky man answered, and unlike the others, he was furious. He searched his yard, checking bushes and shouting threats. We laughed, as we always did, until he finally went back inside. After a few minutes, Wyatt checked the windows and ran back up to ring the bell again. I didn't envy him. I wouldn't have had the courage to ring that man's bell a second time. Knowing he had little time, Wyatt sprinted to the side of the house to hide. This time, the door opened much quicker, and the man emerged holding a rifle. We exchanged panicked glances and whispered, "Holy hell." The man checked the same spots as before, and then some, peering behind his car and a few trees. He finally stopped in the center of his lawn, seemingly lost in thought. He looked around, and his gaze landed in our direction in the woods. McKenna, Rosie, and I ducked lower, hoping he wouldn't see us. After 10 seconds of staring, the man returned inside. Then we saw him at the front window, watching and waiting for any movement in the night. It was creepy. He just stood there like a statue, like Larry Mannequin standing in a store window, again looking into the woods. Meanwhile, Wyatt crept back toward the front door, but we were too scared to move or call out to him. Wyatt rang the bell again and bolted. The man didn't move for a minute, but then he turned and walked away from the window. We didn't see Wyatt again, and we remained too nervous to say anything. Suddenly, we heard Wyatt's voice from across the street yell, "Run!" We didn't understand until we turned to see the man running toward us, rifle in hand. We sprinted like prey fleeing a predator and made our way to Wyatt, who was hiding in some bushes down the street waiting for us. We ran several blocks until we were sure we had lost the man. Wyatt explained that he had yelled when he saw the man sneaking across the street into the woods with his gun. We didn't report the incident to anyone. We simply told a few friends and left it at that. Fortunately, that house was several blocks away, so we never had to pass it again. Did you enjoy that creepy true story? Hopefully you'll be able to make it through all 3. Don't forget to leave us a comment and tell us what you thought of this week's episode. If you love scary stories and creepy content, hit that notification bell. We upload once a week. Now, let's dig into another truly horrific tale. When I was 19, I worked as a maid for an elderly woman named Morgan. I only worked for her for a couple of weeks. She lived in a large old house on a property that could have been beautiful had she taken better care of it. The house was surrounded by woods on 3 sides and a road on the other. Morgan was around 70 years old and kept the interior of her house very dark. She often kept the blinds shut, which I found strange. I would occasionally open them to let in some sunlight, only to find they had been closed again the next time I entered the room. She sometimes lit rooms with candles, making the house feel even more ancient. The wood floors creaked everywhere. Morgan had me do physical tasks she could no longer manage, such as sweeping, dusting, doing laundry, and sorting mail. On weekends, she asked me to stay overnight, since she had 4 bedrooms but lived alone. One Friday, I arrived as usual, speaking little to Morgan. I dropped my backpack in the bedroom I was to sleep in. As I turned to leave, I saw Morgan standing in the doorway. Without greeting me, she instructed me to clean the bedroom immediately. After that, she told me to straighten up the whole house and went upstairs. I didn't see her for the rest of the day, although I occasionally heard her walking around upstairs. That night I went to bed early. Without smartphones, I had no idea what time it was, probably around 9 or 10 o'clock. For the first few hours, everything was peaceful, although the bed was uncomfortable. Eventually, I heard footsteps outside my room on the creaky floors, as if Morgan were passing by slowly. A few minutes later, I heard her footsteps stop outside my door. I sat up, listening. I could hear her weight pressing on the floor, and it started to creep me out. Finally, she walked away, down the stairs, and I heard a door open and close. Most likely the basement door. Later, I heard the basement door open and close again, followed by heavy, slow footsteps coming up the stairs. Once again, the footsteps paused outside my door. I sat up to listen, hearing the doorknob turn. I laid back down, pretending to be asleep. I heard Morgan take a few steps into the room, pause, and then leave. Disturbed, I waited about half an hour before deciding I had to see what was in that basement. I tiptoed to the door and down the creaky stairs. I opened the heavy basement door, flipped on the lights, and crept down the stairs. At the bottom, I was shocked to see 3 old wooden chairs in the center of the basement. In them sat what I could only describe as decaying corpses with wigs on them. A bug crawling on one made me want to puke. I cautiously approached the corpses to confirm they were real. 2 wore men's wigs. The larger one even had a pair of sunglasses on. The smaller one had a long-haired girl's wig and a Barbie doll clutched in its rotting hands. I guessed they were nearly a year old. Then, I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. I couldn't reach the light switch in time, so I hid behind a couch as slow, heavy footsteps descended the stairs. I covered my mouth, heart racing. As Morgan reached the last stair, I heard her whisper my name. For a brief moment, I peeked around the couch and saw Morgan halfway across the basement with a large butcher knife. Knowing she was too slow to catch me, I bolted for the stairs. She screamed my name and chased me. I grabbed my backpack from the bedroom, then ran out the front door and to my car. As I turned it on and caught my breath, I glanced back at the house. Morgan stood in the doorway, watching me. I sped off the property and down the road, making it back home, filled with anxiety. Fortunately, I had never given Morgan my address or phone number, so she was never able to contact me again. I suspect one of those corpses belonged to her deceased husband, but the other 2 remain a mystery. Regardless, it was a disturbing scene, and something was definitely off about that woman. Before we go on to our 3rd story, would any of you maggots like to clean my creepy house? It doesn't have a basement, but I do have plenty of feline familiars creeping around the property. All right, On to story number 3. This one will be absolutely horrifying if you live all alone. For a couple of weeks, I lived in a house that felt like living in hell. I was a college student, and my parents were paying for my modest home. Initially, I was happy with it, but things quickly grew strange. On a stormy Saturday afternoon, I was bored out of my mind, so I decided to chill out and catch up on some Netflix. I was watching TV when I heard a scrape on the living room floor. I looked around, wondering if an animal had gotten inside. I did a quick search of the living room, but I didn't see anything. I shrugged it off and resumed watching TV. That was the first weird occurrence. The rain continued throughout the afternoon and into the night, providing an excuse to be lazy and just stay indoors. Later, I thought I heard something in the kitchen. Foolishly, I grabbed a pillow off the couch to kind of use as a makeshift weapon and crept to the doorway. There, in the dark kitchen, was a box of cereal on the floor, spilling out hundreds of tiny O's. I had no idea how that happened. I dropped the pillow and began cleaning up the mess. As I did, I heard a creak, like someone stepping on a weak spot in the wood floor, coming from near the kitchen table. I looked up, but no one was there. I realized I was becoming paranoid. After cleaning up the mess, I returned to the living room to watch more TV. The thunder outside grew louder, but I found it oddly relaxing. I spent the day in bed, leaving the TV on for background noise and keeping a garbage pail by my side. Around midday, I muted the TV after hearing noises coming from above me. The attic. The attic door was in my bedroom and the noises were unmistakable. 3 or 4 loud thuds. Despite feeling nauseous, I managed to get out of bed. I pulled down the attic door string, grabbed an old baseball bat, and climbed the steps. I flipped the light switch, illuminating a few old boxes that must have belonged to the previous owners. I didn't see anything. I stood there waiting for something to happen, but nothing. No noise or movement at all. I spent the day in bed, leaving the TV on for background noise and keeping a garbage pail by my side. Around midday, I muted the TV after hearing noises coming from above me. The attic. The attic door was in my bedroom and the noises were unmistakable. 3 or 4 loud thuds. Despite feeling nauseous, I managed to get out of bed. I pulled down the attic door string, grabbed an old baseball bat, and climbed the steps. I flipped the light switch, illuminating a few old boxes that must have belonged to the previous owners. I didn't see anything. I stood there waiting for something to happen, but nothing. No noise or movement at all. I climbed back down quickly, feeling scared. That night, I awoke to what I initially thought was thunder. Still feeling unwell, the familiar thud from the attic sent chills down my spine. I pulled down the attic door string again, took my baseball bat, and climbed up the stairs. I mustered my courage and shouted in the most intimidating voice I could. But before I turned on the light, I heard a child giggling in the pitch-black attic. I was seized by fear. My heart raced. As I stood there staring up at the opened attic, I heard the giggling again. I quietly bent down to start folding up the stairs. As I got the first set of steps folded up, I heard the giggling start again. I began to fold up the second set of steps, and that's when I heard the pitter-patter of small feet. They were getting closer and closer to the opening in the attic. I quickly folded up the rest of the stairs and shoved the attic doors closed. Something or someone pulled the attic string back up into the ceiling. This time, I could hear the giggling grow louder and louder. I was scared to death. I fled for my life. I barely remembered running out of the house. I called my dad in the cold rain and asked him to pick me up. I explained everything as best as I could, and my parents, seeing how emotional I was, seemed to believe me. The next day, We packed my things, and I moved back home. To this day, I'm convinced that what I experienced in that house was something paranormal.